Welcome back to CLI's Legalpreneur Spotlight Future 50 series. In this series, we're showcasing thought leaders and doers in legal innovation, legal tech, and AI all around the world. Today, our session is focused on how GenAI is impacting higher education, and particularly how 3 professors in the US have taken their experience with it and a deep-seated passion about sharing and community to the global stage with the Law Profs GenAI Sandbox. I'm joined today by the fabulous founders of the Sandbox, Will Monroe, Assistant Director for Instructional Technology, LSU Law Library, LSU Paul M. Hebert Law Centre, Tracy Norton, Assistant Professor of Law, Eric Vincent Anderson Professor, LSU Law Centre, Susan Tanner, Assistant Professor of Law, Louis D. Brandeis School of Law, University of Louisville. We're going to get into how this wonderful resource came into being, but first, a huge welcome to you all, Tracy, Will, and Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's really great to have you here. I wanted to kick off with talking about your backgrounds, because I know that's kind of been instrumental to this amazing initiative. So, Tracy, I'm going to kick this off with you. Tell us about you and what you do.
So I'm a law professor. I teach legal writing primarily and legal analysis at LSU. I have taught legal writing and analysis for almost 30 years at a couple of different law schools. And I actually introduced a digital platform with a co-author, Christine Hurt, who's now at Southern Methodist University Law School in Dallas. We were frustrated in our first year or two of teaching that we were spending so much time on things that we felt like students could probably do some self-study with. And so I reached out to a friend who was a software engineer and told him what I thought we needed to be able to have students learn legal citation through self-study online. And that was in the early days of the internet, actually. And so he said, yeah, what we wanted to do is actually really simple. And so we did some self-correcting exercises. The students got feedback. And the goal was to make space in our classes for more complex topics. And so I was off to the races after that. Ever since then, I've been sort of chasing ways to use technology to take some things off of our plate so that we can make more room for the things that require that professors and students be in the room together, that colleagues be in the room together, that students be in the room together. And so I am I think a different kind of sort of tech person, in that I'm not tech for tech's sake or tech because I love tech. I'm tech because I love relationships, and I think tech can help us do that. So, but I'm a very traditionally trained American lawyer. I went straight from college to law school, and practiced criminal defense for a few years, and then started teaching. And so I've been here ever since.
Bitten by the tech bug. We're going to get into that in a little bit more. Thank you. That's amazing. Well, how about you? Where are you in terms of this continuum of tech and law schools and all things related to the to your work?
Well, so I think about this all the time, just where I fit into this milieu, because I come from, so my background is in educational technology. I'm the assistant director for instructional technology here. This gives me kind of a role with a lot of different change that happens over time. My portfolio includes odd things sometimes. And I also teach legal technology courses here and in the College of Human Sciences and Education. And I am involved with teaching and learning initiatives on campus. So I have a lot of different areas that I like to get involved with. And I've been at the law school for a long time, but what's kept me here, and maybe this is similar to Tracy a bit, I got started with a law professor who had created a beautiful course devoted to legal interviewing and counseling, a very human endeavor. And he'd explored the possibility for expertise development using a particular approach, viewing your performance, kind of commenting on it, finding errors, being open to feedback from others. And he did it in this way that I found really appealing, because it was something you couldn't do otherwise. Wasn't just more efficient, it was genuinely new and different. And I thought enhanced that teaching relationship and the connections these students had with their practitioners and with others, kind of a mentoring relationship. So that kind of kept me interested in teaching and learning themes here at the law school, even though I'm not a trained lawyer. So that's kind of how I came here. And I was lucky enough to kind of get talking with Susan and Tracy, and they started thinking about this, and it's been so much fun to explore. So that's a little bit about how I got here.
Well, your area must have exploded at the university now, to kind of say the least. I mean, have you found that? I mean, in terms of not just your workload, but the people actually wanting to connect with you?
You know, in terms of the last few years, it has, and I definitely feel that it's changed in the last, 36 months, 24 months. We're in a different moment now than we were in even 9 months ago. And I definitely feel that. And because I'm a person who likes to keep in touch with a lot of different people and find out what they're thinking, and this is how I kind of figure out what I think is important and what I want to work on. It's been at times kind of confusing, because I'm trying to reconcile values and ideas that I think are important, but aren't always in harmony. So I guess it has, but I've also been really grateful for all the opportunities. I just talked to some colleagues yesterday from different departments about what they were doing, and I find all that very gratifying and interesting, but it can be overwhelming at times, I suppose. And I guess that's part of what got us into our sandbox philosophy too, which maybe we'll talk about.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We're going to. I can see how all these threads are weaving together now, law and tech and relationships. Susan, tell us about you and what you do, because I know the threads land with you as well, right?
They do. So, I mean, yes, my background, I also I teach a few classes. I'll be teaching an AI class next year. But I actually used to work with these two brilliant folks at LSU, which is how the idea started. I actually have no idea whose idea it was, other than I think we all three work so well together, and these are two of my most favorite people in the world to work with. And so I think it just sort of all sprung out of three heads simultaneously. But part of the reason I became interested in generative AI is because I had been going to some conferences where folks were talking about it within the law. And one of the things that happened is, when ChatGPT sort of burst onto the scene, no one really knew what it was or knew much about the technology. But I had a background. My PhD is in rhetoric from Carnegie Mellon, and so it was actually really in corpus and computational linguistics, which means that I had been using machine learning to study language for 7 years or so. And so when folks would sort of say bits and pieces, the first thing in my head would be, well, that's not quite right, right? Like you're sort of conflating traditional programming and algorithmic sort of computing with machine learning, which operates just vastly differently than what you're expecting. And so my first little bits was being that annoying person who sort of said, well, actually, let me correct you on this one small point. And then it became, I was doing talks, I was making it part of my research. But I just thought, it didn't take all that much a couple of years ago to know a little more than the average person about how machine learning worked, especially in the legal field. And so I just sort of naturally gravitated towards generative AI in the law.
Absolutely. But I can see how that skill set and background around languages, probably, right, more specifically, with this particular initiative, but also in law, was such a critical skill set as well. Wow, what a power trio we've got here to chat about all this. And because of that, I can't miss this opportunity to ask you first, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the sandbox, and I want to, but to just get some thoughts about the impact of generative AI on higher education, but I guess particularly legal education, because that's our focus today, and how you kind of foresee that in the short term. I'm going to get a little bit longer to ask you for a longer one at the end of this session. But, well, I wanted to kick off that question with you, if I may. What's the impact that you're seeing in education more broadly, but legal education?
Okay. So my perspective on that sort of question is, anchored in my work teaching legal tech courses here, in supporting faculty here at the law school through instructional technologies, basically services that we provide, working with faculty and students and practitioners, and working on the campus-wide teaching and learning initiative. So a lot of different inputs for me, I feel, at least it feels like a lot. And so in my work teaching and designing the legal tech courses, I've tried to put myself in places like the ABA Tech Show, and other gatherings where I've been able to meet with academic, public, and private sector folks at AI-themed events. This has given me a lot of incoming material, different attitudes and different levels of enthusiasm and awareness and concern about different things. And I guess in a lot of those circles I just mentioned, the sort of ABA Tech Show, AI-themed events in sort of law school world, I've benefited from a lot of folks that are very generous with their time, that are very enthusiastic. They're willing to meet and share ideas. I guess I want to say that I've cold emailed and called people quite a lot, and I've gotten good responses back. And I guess I feel like that's something that, I don't know, that's been useful to me. But then in my work supporting faculty back here and, supporting their instructional technology needs, I've seen some enthusiasm, but more caution and uneasiness. And I think I found this to be the case in higher education more generally, maybe even more so. And so for me, this combination of like enthusiastic engagement on one hand, generous sharing in some areas, and then real concern and exhaustion in higher education, it's created this interesting dynamic for me. And I was talking to Tracy about this just last week. I'm a curious person. I'm interested in the ethical questions. I'm trying to resolve them. I appreciate the values of teachers. And I guess I'm going to tie it back to the sandbox as I understand it, which is that I think this idea of a place of play and, kind of a safe place to play is helping me to kind of, and how we're trying to shape that and provide people with that opportunity. I mean, to some extent, I think I'm trying to do that with my own third-year law students before they head out into the world. I want to give them a chance to kind of examine, how this works, and play with it, and do so as a way of maybe resolving some of those tensions. So that's my attempt to try to answer that question that gets at what I think is out there. As far as where it's going to go, I feel like some of those themes are going to kind of continue to grow. The enthusiasm and interest, the concern and maybe exhaustion in some instances.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned there a connection with industry and going to the ABA Tech Show, etc. How important in the work that you do is having that connection with industry, or being informed, I guess, by what's going on in industry?
I mean, it's been enormously helpful to me because, for one, it's allowed me to simply try out some tools that are meant to be law specific, that are meant to meet needs that lawyers have. It's useful because I get a sense of what's important there in those, with legal tech, and I guess what's being valued there in ways that might differ from what's happening inside of legal education. I guess, it's provided me with an opportunity to open, opportunities for my own students. It's given me a chance to just meet people up close who sometimes have surprisingly noble aims, I guess I want to say too. And I've really been impressed with that. And not always surprising. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to say, I understand that you need to be able to support any private enterprise that you have, but I've really been impressed with a lot of the people that I've met in that way. I guess I plan to return, in the next year or two. I maybe not go back every year, but it certainly helped me. I guess I hope I'm answering your question there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's kind of like, or perhaps unlike anything else that we've worked with in the industry, it is a whole of industry thing, right? It's impacting every aspect of it. And so the solutions or the pieces that we play seem to kind of be integrated and interconnected in ways that perhaps we haven't necessarily seen, and is driving some of those collaborations. And I think making the sharing probably much more generous, and the sense of community even stronger in many respects. Does that sound about right as well?
Yeah, and I guess I feel like there's like sort of I believe there's a shared sense of we're trying to figure something out,
Absolutely.
and we feel like we have an opportunity that might not last forever. And so there seems to be a willingness to kind of, there's some mutual aid going on. You know, I guess I think that's what I see.
Yeah. Susan, let me ask you the same question. What's your impression of how this tech is impacting higher ed, and again, specifically legal ed? Because you come at this from another different point of view or approach as well, right?
I do. Well, so I really think about it in two ways. I think about it as the skills law students need to develop and the skills that lawyers need to develop. And in some ways, those are in conflict when it comes to generative AI. In other words, we see that I was just sort of talking with someone earlier today about how students come with a varied skill set. And one of the things that generative AI could do if it's used improperly is mask where students are having trouble, right? So that I can't diagnose. They're struggling with this thing, right? Because it can kind of help students' writings. It can kind of hide those deficiencies. And so I'm not maybe able to help my students as early as I would like to, because if they're using generative AI, it could be sort of masking some things that they're struggling with, right?
Great point.
And they could be using it to substitute for their own legal analysis, all of the things that are so hard, that we're working so hard to get them through, for especially I work with first year students primarily. And so these are really important foundational skills that they need to work on. And it could be sort of substituting for their learning in a way that could be counterproductive. So we have that on the one side. And then we also know that that they will need to use generative AI in their careers, right? And so we can't let them graduate without having a good understanding of how it works, what it's good for, and what it's not good for. And so getting them in between that, sort of bridging those gaps. And so I try to have them use it, often to get familiar with the technology, and hope that I can trust them to not use it when they, really should be displaying, some growth and development on their own. But that's a hard thing to sort of to deal with. And I think, so I've been on my university-wide AI committee for a while now, various versions of this, and it's something that not just in the law school, but across higher ed, we're dealing with, because there are definitely some skills that we need to make sure that students, grow and develop on their own without too much technology, sort of interfering with that. And I will also say this is just a continuum, because it's the same sort of thing, right? Students have had instant access to all sorts of information, right? For years now, and this is just amping it up. It's making it cheaper and easier to find sort of easy answers to complex questions. And so I think that's where we're at right now. And I think that's also why you're going to see a lot of pushback from higher ed about incorporating generative AI, because it can be detrimental to student learning if they're using it incorrectly. But again, knowing that, I wouldn't feel right letting my students graduate without having some basic understanding of the technology before they go to practice.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what a vast and fast way that we've come from folks, at some universities banning, on the basis of probably academic integrity, the use of any AI tools, to it now actually becoming an employability issue with
Yes.
graduates, and that's all happened in a head spinning amount of time. So Tracy, I've got to come to you on this one as well, because you've got this amazing deep history, as you were discussing early on, about using technology. And share with us how you see this all happening in higher ed and legal ed.
It's interesting because over the 30 years that I've been in higher education, first as a student and then, for almost my entire adult life as a professor, I have watched this resistance happen like just over and over and over. And so when I first started teaching in 1997, and I remember at the time thinking, I don't know a lot about this technology, but this sounds really Wile E. Coyote to me. Should we do something to the walls so that the Wi-Fi can't get into the classroom because we don't want them using the internet in the classroom?
Wow.
And I remember thinking, this is a losing battle.
Yeah.
And so I am generally with most things, and certainly with technology and higher ed, I'm a fly in the teeth of it kind of gal. Like, this is where we're going. So let's just go. Let's just go. The sooner we go, the sooner we can figure this out. I've been through the whole laptops in the classroom battle. Should we allow them to have laptops in the classroom? I'm also not one. I don't believe a lot in policing a lot of student behavior. These are law students, they're adults. And so as I've told my students for years, if you've got enough money and time to fritter away a legal education and sit in the back of the room on TikTok, more power to you. Great. I wish I had that kind of time and money that I could just fritter it away on TikTok at a law school. And so I always tell them, if you can do that, great. That's awesome. So I think that generative AI is just the newest version of that in higher ed. And so all through my career, I have watched law professors go through this existential crisis of, oh, is this going to be the thing that kills our job? Oh, is this going to be so it was going to be the internet, and then it was going to be Wi-Fi, and then it was going to be laptops, and then, and so it's where we're going to be obsolete. And my position has always been, well, then you probably ought to be.
Yeah.
You probably ought to be. If you can't keep up, you probably ought to be. Because I talk to lawyers in their 70s and 80s who love generative AI. So I don't see this as a unique problem in higher ed. I think it is a difference in type. It's not a difference in kind. It's not a dramatically different kind of problem. It's the same problem we've always had. And I believe that the solution is the same problem that I have always supported, which is we have to know more about it than our students.
Yep.
And we have to be able to teach our students about it. Because I don't think it's very productive to tell students. In fact, I don't think it's responsible to tell students that something is bad because I'm afraid to learn about it.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, I don't understand. Why do you want to be in education? I think this is just a different kind of thing. And to me, all of this technology, it has presented us an opportunity that I think a lot of professors squander. It presents us this opportunity to go back to a time when you can sit and think with a pencil and a pad of paper, because now I'm not wrestling over how to write my assignment instructions. I tell the AI my basic instructions. I tell it the tone I want the instructions to have. And then I spend a little bit of time cleaning it up. And now I've got more time to meet with students. I've got more time to draft practice materials. I've got more time to go over practice materials. So I think this is the same problem we've had in higher education. I suspect, I remember being in third grade, not being allowed to own a calculator. Like they forbade us at school from owning calculators. And even at 8, I thought, how are you going to make sure I don't own a calculator? So I went right out, 8 years old, to Radio Shack and bought a calculator and just dared them from my bedroom to call my parents and say something about it, So we're always going to find technology. We're going to figure out how to use it, and, we got to roll with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But of the many great things that you mentioned there, one really jumped out is that we are dealing with a mindset shift, aren't we? And I think particularly in law and lawyers and the lawyer mindset, from kind of looking at something and saying, no, we can't deal with it, we won't deal with it, as you've described some folks, versus let's look at the opportunities with the appropriate amount of caution, and see how we can move forward, because this is the future. And I suspect that's a mindset shift that many will be able to make, but there will be some who won't. And that's just the reality, as you say, with so many things. But let me stay with you, Tracy. But we're there now. I want to jump in to the Law Profs GenAI Sandbox and talk about this. Firstly, I want to say to all of you, congratulations on what an amazing initiative this is, and what an amazing resource this is going to be. It is now, but even more so as it grows and your community grows. It's absolutely incredible. There's a lot of pieces to it, so I'm just going to step us through these so we can be sure to let folks know all of the amazing things that it does and provides for them. So as I said, Tracy, firstly with you, we've touched on how the sandbox kind of started, but how did you actually, I guess, coalesce all of that and launch what you've now got? And by the way, folks, we will be sure to put links to how to get to the sandbox with this recording as well. So how did you kick it off?
So this was different than any project I had ever been part of, and I think I can speak for all three of us when I say that this was really different, because this wasn't the kind of project where you can start and then you just sort of work, step by step and make progress. It's you make progress and now the progress you made is obsolete.
Yeah.
And so we were meeting for a while, like I think every couple of weeks, sometimes every month, sometimes every couple of months. And really every time we met, it was like, okay, so there's a whole new thing now. Like there's a whole new deal now. And for a while, I was really concerned because we had committed to do this project. We got a grant to do it, and we had committed to do this project. And I was like, we're never going to find a point where we can have a deliverable. Like we knew what we wanted the deliverable to be, but we're like, when are we ever going to, we're never going to catch up. And so finally we got to the point where we're like, okay, let's just put out what we have. And I was the last one to come on board with that because I was like, I don't know if we can, what? And so it was like, let's just put out what we have. And that was when I said, well, wait a minute, because we were originally going to call it a toolkit. And I said, well, then I don't think we can call it a toolkit. Like I was really uncomfortable with that just from a marketing perspective. I was like, I don't think we have a toolkit. I think we have some great tools and some great ideas, but mostly I felt like what we had was a sandbox, sort of in the sense of a digital sandbox that you use to work through problems online, but also a physical play sandbox. And I felt like that made a little more sense to me about what we had. So we came together because the three of us were very interested in AI, and this is about 1.5 to 2 years ago. And we had this opportunity to apply for a grant. It was just a teaching grant. It wasn't AI specific. And we were like, I wouldn't say any one of us considers ourselves expert at AI, but in the land of the blind, sure,
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah.
And so we realized, well, we're not experts, but we're comfortable, at least with playing. And so we were seeing all of the resistance in higher ed, and we're like, we think we can pitch AI in a way that entices people to come try it out, that you don't have to have a big technical background. And so that was where we got the idea of, well, why don't we have resources that are targeted at different levels? And so I think it was maybe Susan that came up with the idea of, or maybe Will, let's have a quiz. Just a short quiz. I think it's 7 or 10 questions. And based on that quiz, you get a label. And this is the kind of AI person you are. and based on your label, you start exploring the resources. So if you're a beginner, if you're a novice, if you're just, you don't know anything and you're a little nervous, start here. And so Susan drafted some great stuff about, let's get it to write an email. And so once we had that idea, we kind of started building from there. And so as each of us started building things that we used in our everyday kind of workflow, we'd start adding them to the toolkit. And actually, I added a bunch of stuff just the other day, because I have this, I don't have as much of the sense of move fast and break things as I'd like to. And so I'm trying to get there more. And so the other day I'd put together a list of AI newsletters for a colleague who said, how do you keep up with all this? And I was like, oh, I don't. I don't at all. And I said, but I get all these newsletters and I just peruse them. And so, once a week I'll get some new idea. And she said, well, what newsletter? So I put together a list of newsletters and I was like, put that on the sandbox. And so I added the newsletters to the sandbox. And so I think we're starting to pick up speed, all three of us doing that. And we're doing less, really very little to no consulting with each other anymore. We're just putting stuff up there. We're just getting it up there. And I like that. I like the way that's turning out because, we trust each other. I trust Susan and Will to put up content and I'm not worried about it. And they, beyond all reason, trust me to put content up there. And so, for a while, we sort of stalled out a tiny bit after we published within the last month. But then I think each of us individually have started kind of picking up a little bit. And I think that's gonna pick up speed. And then over the summer, one of the things I'm really looking forward to is taking a lot of the things that I do every day and just putting them up in the sandbox.
Well, let me jump to you and kind of combine a couple of thoughts here in the sandbox in terms of how it works, but also the content. So if I land and I've worked out, I'm going to call it my persona, according to that, what happens then? Like, can I still search, for example, for things if I don't do that, or does that really help me? It sounds like it fine tunes it, for want of a better expression, into the sort of stuff I might need. But what do I see when I land and I want to go and have a look around?
Well, I mean, when you hit our homepage, if that's what brings you there, and I have a link from some other page, it's fairly, I mean, I think pretty standard, recognizable looking web navigation right along the top with the content that we have. And I mean, I guess if you were asking me, I would say, well, why don't you take a look at our homepage there and then look at our what is AI and our approach sections. And I think it's this play sandbox kind of try it out idea that we're trying to convey in an environment where people feel less of the sort of pressure and maybe anxious feelings that we all know inhibit learning and aren't good for taking on new ideas and being receptive to new things. If we're successful at that, that's the sort of place where we've tried to express that. That is our intent. And then, the trying it out page, which, that is also under the sort of what is AI heading. So you go there and then you can, get your label, find out what kind of an AI person you are at this point. And I mean, label or whatever. We just want to give people a productive sort of starting point there.
Narrow it down a bit for them to start, right? Yeah.
Right, because I think a person can instantly see, like, well, I don't know about that, but I am probably the type of person that merely needs to set up an account on one service or perhaps just another one to get started. Like that would be a +1 for me. That would be another step that I haven't taken.
Yeah.
For example, under the novices, you've got responding to and composing emails. I mean, there's probably people that haven't tried that, and they could. It might be useful to them. Starting in a personal domain, something you know well, an avocation, a hobby, a daily obligation you have that you need an idea about, cooking, etc. Just something safe that you understand and that you can play with without feeling like you're risking very much. And then you move on, you feel more comfortable. Intermediate, you can refine some of these prompts you use. We give suggestions for them. You can take a look at sample answers for legal writing tasks once you head the direction of, towards professional goals. Creating lesson plans. I mean, I've done so much creating lesson plans with different tools, with Gemini, with ChatGPT, with Claude, which I'm increasingly liking quite a lot, with the various research functions inside of them. I mean, oh wow. Anyway, I just find that tremendously useful. I mean, I'm designing and teaching a new course, and as much as I thought I designed it in advance, I still have so many other questions and practical things that I need to come up with on a daily, weekly basis. And so, I don't know, I want to endorse that idea for anyone who teaches or does any kind of training or workshop out there. This can be very useful to you, even with very modest prompts. Things that don't seem very sophisticated could give you very good results. And that's what I would hope that someone finds, and as you keep going, you can look at simulated student interaction. And, as you get more advanced, you can get into things that are really much more complicated, designing a curriculum and assessment strategies, more complex legal scenarios, things that well professionally and can imagine managing and delegating in some way. You can use these tools to help you. The core sort of skills, managing, delegation, description, these can come to your aid with these. So I guess as a starting point, I'd want to say that's where I would recommend. And that's kind of my general endorsement for anyone getting started.
I mean, it's the full range, by the sounds of it, of what a teacher would do, almost from the point of some admin stuff to the actual day-to-day work that they would do, but also almost some personal tutoring for you as well, right? And which is amazing.
And also, I've got it somewhere around here. I have a Plod, the little note. So I have the not the card. I have the new little Plod pen thing that you can hang around your neck or put on your wrist or whatever. And I'm really having trouble. I'm a very anxious writer. Like I love to write, but I'm a very anxious writer when it comes to scholarship. I was really having trouble making myself write this article down. And so I had a car trip to Tennessee a few weeks ago. And so I've done a lot of presentations on the topic. And so I just did my presentation. I recorded it in the Plod and then added some other ideas that I've had. And so the next step, and then on the way back, added some more stuff to it. So I have several hours of dictated content, which without AI would be useless to me now. And so what I'll do is probably next week is I'll take that Plod recording, upload it into Plod's app, have it format it for me as an article. Then I'm going to move it over to ChatGPT, probably, maybe Claude, see what they can do with it, have them work on it. And then I'm going to have enough of a workable draft that I can start going in and putting the citation, because I've got the sources, I've done the research, I just have to get it shaped up. And so that's one of the things that I want to do this summer is put some of that workflow onto the Sandbox. But there's very little that I do anymore that I don't use AI to do faster and better. And, now when I write an email, I just stream of consciousness and then I plug it into ChatGPT and say, this needs to be professional and better organized and right away. And so I don't spend a lot of time anguishing over things.
If I wanted to provide some content to go onto the Sandbox, is that possible as well? Yeah, see lots of nods there. Okay, fantastic.
We're trying to make that a little bit more collaborative. Right now, you sort of have to let us know that you want to provide something, and then we'll post you. But at some point, we'd like to do something more like a message board where we can have some more direct conversation. It's not available yet, but we're trying to put that in. But the only other thing I was going to say is I wanted to pick up on something that both Will and Tracy were saying, which is that I think we have this idea, especially among lawyers, that we want to be an expert in something before we try it out. And the entire design of the Sandbox is instead of making it feel like a task, I have to learn everything about this so that, you know, I have some expertise and so I can start using it, that we just wanted people to play around with it a little bit so they can gain some expertise. But instead of it being a burden for them, it would hopefully take away some of their burden, right? And so that's how the entire sandbox is designed, to just be a little bit of an instant ad for everyone's life. They might seem, the first few tasks probably seem fairly simplistic, right? If you're coming to the sandbox, you might think, okay, I want to know how to write an appellate brief using AI. And that's just not where I think you should start. And so we sort of decided everything's going to start with something where you don't have to be an expert to use it, right? In other words, things like emails, you know whether it's getting the information right or wrong because you have absolute control over that. And then you can start to see where it hallucinates, where it doesn't, where it's trustworthy, where it's not, so that you're not submitting a brief with a lot of made up citations. And so that really sort of undergirds the entire sort of design of the site. But I just wanted to sort of let folks know that. But again, it is really about that sort of sharing of resources. So we'd also love to get more in there from more different folks, especially anything from, hey, I want to do this, but I have no idea where to start. Oh, we can design something. You know, if that's a big ask, you know, if that's something that a lot of people will want, to, I've been doing this, and we've actually gotten a few folks who have said, hey, I'm designing a lesson plan, and I'd love to share it with you. And we've been so happy to get those sorts of resources as well.
The other thing is, once people start to, like, if they'll start with those very simple tasks, they have the expertise to begin brainstorming. Well, wait a minute. If I can do this, can I do this? And so people become, you know, they start to realize, oh, I can use this. If once I understand how it works, experts in teaching particularly are going to begin to explode with ideas about how to do things.
And it's a great point, Tracy, because I think that you do have to actually engage with the technology. That's a really big point. You can't delegate this. You've got to engage with it to actually be able to know what it can and it can't do. Susan, I want to ask you just a couple of quick but very practical questions on the sandbox as well. We've got the link and we can go to it, so we know that it's readily accessible. But I guess the other part of it that I should ask is all of this free? And do you have to like subscribe or be a member, or are there any of those things attached to it?
It is currently, and hopefully, I mean, I can't imagine any way that it's not ever going to be free, right? So this was, we designed this not only through sort of a labor of love, but also through a grant from Allwood, a local organization here, so that it is free for everyone. But also, I think part of the ethos of this site is, you know, something that was really important to me when I was doing digital humanities work, which is that the work that we produce should be accessible to multiple people. That we're not trying to hoard all the information. And so one of the things, and I want to make this really clear too, that I've tried to put anything that I've written, I've tried to make it so that someone could easily download it. Things like lesson plans, and go ahead and use it. No attribution necessary. Just go ahead and copy it, change it in any way that you want to. These are supposed to be sort of free and open resources. We're going to really make sure that that's clear on our website. But yeah, never a membership fee, never a subscription. Just go ahead and use what you want.
But it's integral also to that sense of community and a safe place to come, and I guess connection, because through all of this stuff, you're also connecting people and they can go out and approach you individually and ask you more questions. And so that's really important as well.
That's been so great because we really have gotten great ideas from some folks, right? Again, I'm really glad that we have the three brains. You know, I think we very much
definitely.
Now we have, you know, hundreds, thousands more brains that are sort of giving us great ideas as well.
Yeah. I want to jump into a final question with all of you, but if I can just for a second hold us on this and ask this question of you, Tracy. Lots of stuff being contributed to the site. We've spoken about that. And obviously that building of community. if you're looking just a little bit far ahead, so I'm not going to go too far ahead because, as you said, things are changing kind of by the hour or daily at the moment, by the minute, maybe would be more accurate. What are your aspirations in the next, say, 6 to 12 months for the sandbox?
I'd like us to just be able to add more resources, and then to add what Susan was talking about, sort of a community space where people can talk with one another and share ideas and share resources. One of the things that is on my list for this summer is to add a prompt engineering sort of, I don't want to call it a course because that sounds like it's going to take a lot of time, but like some little tutorials
Yeah.
that you can sort of stack together, because there's a guy here in he's in Lafayette, Louisiana. His name is John Munsell, and he just released a book called Ingrain AI, or it's just about to release a book. And I took a course with John over the summer with some other folks at LSU in the teaching and learning community, and he taught us a prompt, uh, a way of prompting, a prompt framework that actually fits really nicely with something that Susan and I have been working on. And so I'd like to get that up so that people can start using that and start developing their own stuff. The heart of it is something called prompt stacks. And so they're reusable, scalable prompts. And so you don't have to write your prompt from scratch every time. You don't even have to cut and paste it every time. It's, if I want this audience, I'll get this little stack and this document stack and this purpose stack, and I'll put them all together. And so you end up with, it's like Legos with just endless possibilities.
Yeah.
So I hope that I hope that we are now, and I hope that we will continue to be leaders and leaders isn't exactly the word I want, but people who model enthusiasm for this and possibility. And there's so much these days not to be joyful about, and there's so much to be very cynical about. And I feel like this is really, there haven't been many sort of unknown things that have come out, and this is generative AI in legal education and generative AI in law practice. It's going to be what we make of it. And so there are plenty of people trying to make money off of it, and I like money too. But we don't want to lose sort of the joy of play in favor of commodification. And so I think we just want to continue to develop, more broadly, more deeply. This is a place of community where we can play and have good ideas, and this is the future of education. This is we get to write the future of education. So great.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like celebrating experimentation, and it's kind of what we do as educators, right?
Yeah.
So let me get to that final wrap question. And Susan, I'm giving you a heads up. I'm going to come to you first on this one, but let me set the scene a little bit. I imagine that there might be people listening to or watching this session who are working in higher education now, a whole bunch of different faculties. They've seen lots on generative AI. They've been feeling overwhelmed. We've touched on that a few times during the course of this discussion. And I think we have all been there. There's just been so much information coming so quickly. So my question to you first is this, Susan, but I want to get all of your thoughts on this. Should those people feel a sense of urgency to engage with the tech today, and I'm underscoring the word today, and where do they start?
So I would say, actually, this is very uncharacteristic of me. I'm going to say, yes, they should feel a sense of urgency to engage with it today. But I think not in the pressure because the world's going to pass them by if they don't. I think because if they're not using it, they're missing opportunities to streamline their own lives, right? In other words, if you could imagine, if you were walking back and forth 10 miles to work and everyone else was driving past you in a car, it's not, your sort of urgency to get a car is not about the world passing you by. It's because you could just make your commute so much more efficient. And I feel like that's actually the urgency that we have. And again, it's part of the design of the site, but I think it does feel overwhelming. And I'm very aware of that as well. I even feel overwhelmed, and I've been working in this space for more than 10 years, for more than 15 years, I guess, in sort of machine learning and AI. And I still feel overwhelmed by the rapid pace of change in it. And I think maybe that's another reason to start today, is because you don't want to feel like you're 4 years behind, right? You don't want to feel like you're so far behind that you'll never be able to catch up. Is one of the reasons I would say, yes, start today, but start in ways that make sense for your own life.
Yeah, absolutely. Will, what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I think I like that. I think I like the idea that you'd be missing out on something, and maybe the thing I would want to emphasize is that you'd be missing out on an opportunity to understand what's happening. If you care, there may be things that in a higher ed environment, since I think that's where your question was aimed at, right? That you care about and you value. And I think that, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. And I think that it's important for you to appreciate how that environment is changing and what that means. Has that moved some things around? What has moved? What has remained the same? I really think that eschewing the opportunities to learn about how this works are just to your detriment, regardless of what you decide. And it's like that person, I really think of that person right now because I run into them a lot in my teaching and learning role. And I really want to encourage them to try it out, see where it goes, try to remember what it was that got you into this work in the first place. Is that being harmed or is that being enhanced? How so? Make it clear to yourself. Make it clear to your students that, no, this is worth doing this way. And I'm going to tell you why. Or, no, there's an opportunity over here that I think you would, I guess that's the kind of nucleus of the conversation I want to have with that person.
It's really tapping what we hope all of our students have at the end of the day, isn't it? Which is curiosity. That at the end, that's at the core of what we're trying to tap into here too. Is that a fair comment, Will?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like Tracy and I were talking about this just, like I say, just last week. I think that's so important and so precious and useful. And you can let it work for you and carry you into new understandings of things. You don't have to love everything that you see. You can still get quite a lot out of, addressing what's there anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tracy, we started with you. The last word is yours.
That's my very favorite thing. We have had typewriters and printing presses and computers and all kinds of things for a very long time now, and people still write poetry. They go outside and they take a pen and a notebook and they sit by the lake and they write poetry. And so we're not asking anybody to change their identity. And I think curiosity is definitely a great way to do that. And I tell not students, I tell students, but they don't need this as much as the lawyers that I talk to. I tell them, don't take away the whole, this is new technology and I have to blah, blah, blah. And I say, go home tonight, get on ChatGPT and just type out, my name is Tracy and I'm a law professor and I don't know anything about AI and I'm a little bit scared. What can you tell me?
Yeah.
And you just start it there.
Yeah, absolutely. Start at the very beginning and you'll probably be surprised how quickly things advance for you from there.
Also, if people need an incentive, the next time you have a gift to buy for somebody you don't know very well, get ChatGPT to tell you what to buy. It does a great job of that.
Very practical thing to end on. Tracy, Will, and Susan, again, congratulations on the Sandbox, and thank you so much for spending the time with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you very much, Terry.